So, well, my friends, here we go again. The 90s, part 3 already. If you like the 90s, if you live there, this is your video. Enjoy it, we lean back, we have time. In the 90s, there was no smartphones, yeah, especially in the early 90s. You know what I mean? So there was much more time. And so, relax. I have a lot of things here. The last parts was a lot of wrestling. And now we have complete other stuff. We have films, we have music, we have roller skate, yeah, you see it. We have the American Gladiators and all that stuff. If you like that, this will be your video. So here we are. I have again my drink here, yeah, I have to make something. The iced tea, yeah, but you know it already. Back then it was Lipton. Today I have a Rauch because I didn't get a punner. Iced tea was also a thing of the 90s, or? I was crazy. Sprite, yeah, Sprite, Coca-Cola, Fanta. Those three things, and then Mezzo Mix. Everyone was drinking it from the cans. Nice. So you see, we also have games here, yeah? Because the 90s, there the games were growing up. The consoles, yeah? The 90s were a meaningful part of this. And all things what you see here, we will go to everything. So enjoy it. It is for everyone something here. Music, film, and all that stuff. But wait. I'm thirsty, sorry. But we have time, you know. So, we go on to it. The 90s, to me, these are two parts. The early 90s, yeah, from 1990 to 95, and then from 95 to 1999. It is really two different sides of the 90s, because in the early 90s, there was no internet, there was no smartphones, yeah. I mean, I talk now from general, yeah. I think 99% of the normal people didn't have it. And then later on in the 90s, the internet was coming to the normal flats, to your house, you know what I mean. Also the smartphones entered in, some people had it. Yeah, for example, in the late 90s in school, maybe one person, two person had a mobile phone, yeah. And that it was. And for the young people, in the 90s, there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no TikTok, there was nothing of it, yeah. That all came in the early 2000s. Before we had also things, I don't remember, when was MySpace? MySpace? Was it before the 2000 ICQ? Yeah, around that time. So, early 90s and the late 90s. And I can tell a lot of stories because I lived there. I'm a boy from the 80s, but I also have seen the 90s. So now we get it on. Which of those things you want to start? With film, with music, with games, with other stuff? So we enter in the early 90s. So here we have some figures. You see that? Figures were also a thing of the 90s, yeah, that was really crazy. As a child, I think every child, doesn't matter if girls or boys, everyone had such a figure. Yeah, the girls maybe had the Barbie, the Ken and that stuff, and the boys, many had the wrestling figures, what we had in the last part, and there existed all other things, yeah. Like here, I think this was the Dinos. I don't know when this comic series, it was from a comic series, television series. The Dinos, was it a 90 original, but it was running a lot of time in the 90s. So I think every kid here in the Middle Europe or also maybe in America have seen this in the early 90s. So the Dinos. Then, of course, here we have it, He-Man. Yeah, He-Man. But this was originally, I think, from the 80s. But this was running all the time in the 90s. As a child, I can only talk for myself. I was standing up when was no school at weekend at, I don't know, 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I went to the television and there I watched the things, and that was all time on almost all channels that was running a comic series. Yeah, the Turtles, there was all things, and also He-Man. He-Man was really great. And so there in the 90s you could buy then the figures, yeah, from He-Man and all that stuff. So He-Man was really a big part to me in the 90s. I liked it always, you know, a man, no fear and all that stuff. That was great. And there was also other figures like Batman, yeah. I also had Batman figures, the Turtle figures. And there was from all kind of stuff you got figures. And that was the crazy part, you know. Nowadays I don't think it is that much, because people have the smartphone, you can watch all things and all that stuff, you know what I mean. But back then we didn't have it. You have seen it on television, or you got a magazine. Yeah, the magazines back then, I also will talk about that today. The magazine was our only thing to see pictures and to get the information. The magazine back then was like now the internet, YouTube, Instagram and all that stuff. Now you watch it. You know what I mean? Nowadays you can watch 24 hours. Yeah. So I don't know if you get that excited like back then. A magazine was maybe coming out once a month. And then you watched it. Wow, the picture. Wow, cool. Wow, there exists a figure. Then you went to a toys shop. Back then it was Toys R Us. Then you have seen the figures. Wow, cool. You know. And then maybe you get a figure. So that was really, really cool. And the green one, I loved this also, but I think they made only one series about it. But I cannot name the name of this figure. He was the main character, but I really don't know the name. I know it was one of my favorite, but I always forgot the name. So I don't know what the name was, but I liked it so much. And I can remember when I got this figure, that was also in Toys R Us. I went in and it was completely unexpected. I was watching always, well, maybe there is a new figure. And again, nowadays you only watch the internet or television, yeah. So then you know what exists, but back then you had no idea. Maybe you have seen it on an advertisement on television, but it was always, as I told in the last parts, in the US. Yeah, in the US they had those figures, there was the advertisement most of the time. And here in Europe we were 1 year back, and one day it was in a shop, and then you had your eyes, wow. So you went into the shop, then you have known where this area is, where the figures are, and you immediately watched from a wide angle, and you have seen it immediately. Wow, there is something new, what is it? And then you have seen it. And the same was with this figure. And I know the day what we did then. It was with my grandmother, she bought me this, and I know exactly what we have done then. So meaningful it was. Yeah, and it was maybe around 1994, 1994 it has to be, I think, or 1995, 1994. So really, really crazy. And so we go on to the film, because here we have the Turtles, but this was the film. Yeah, I cannot put it up now because all will fall down. It's so much here. This was the original film, Turtles. I think it was in the early 90s. And yeah, that was also amazing, because normally you have seen the comic series. And this is also a part, I think, every little child from the early 90s, I think there is no one who didn't know the name Turtles. Yeah, the Turtles was a meaningful thing in the early 90s. I think every child, when you go swimming in school, everyone have known the Turtles. Yeah, all 4 turtles and all that stuff. And then the real film came out, was a big deal, was very nice, I liked it. but the comic series, that was great. Yeah, and Turtles, you got it in games, everywhere there were the Turtles. Yeah, so really a big part of the 90s. And then we come to the films from the early 90s. We start with here, Kevin Alone at Home. I mean, one of the most meaningful Christmas films what has ever been done, what has ever been filmed. You know, with the name, I always have the problem to say it right. Culkin, I don't know how you call him. But this was really, I have seen the film when it went out. Yeah, I was there. Kevin Alone at Home, and then the next part, the last part, Kevin Alone in New York. It was called in English, you know. I think it was the right way. That was really, really crazy. I still like the film. It's still running, yeah. But what I know, they have changed now some things in the German synchronization. Yeah, when it's running on television, it is other thing now, because they say there were racist lines in there. Yeah, and so they have changed it now, and it's not the same as the original back then in German. I don't know in other languages, but that I have written not long ago, 1, 2, 3 years ago. I have read this, so it's called. I have read this in a magazine or in the internet. I think in the internet. So there were really meaningful films, early 90s. And then we go on, of course, to the other films. But before we make this, I have to go up a little bit, because there were magazines in the early 90s, and as a child, especially in Germany and in Austria, every kid had this thing. It was called Limit. Maybe some people will now remember it. I think this has been forgotten for many, many people. Young people never have heard of this magazine, but Limit was like, they have said it in one word. Yeah, young people also will not know it, but they said this was the Playboy for the kids. Yeah, the Playboy for the kids. So that was absolutely back then the high-end thing. Yeah, Limit. Why? Because there were comics in. Yeah, it was a small magazine, so nothing. There were comics in. That was always cool as a child. Yeah, maybe now the young ones will think, wow, what is this to read? That is boring. But back then we had nothing else. Yeah, when it was running on television, and then you also had from famous actors was back then the heroes for the kids. You had stories, background stories in there, and also wrestling was in there. All what was cool in the 90s, yeah? Music, sport, yeah? Film, wrestling, comic, all that stuff. It was all in there. And that was great. And there you see the heroes what we had back then. It is from June 1993. Yeah, they are all, I have another two here, they are all from 1993. And you see it, Sylvester Stallone was on there. He made the thing, what was it, cliffhanger. Come back, Sly Stallone, come back, cliffhanger. +8 Rambo cards. Yeah, Rambo, it was Rambo, yeah. There were 3 main parts back then from Rambo, but this was in the 80s. But also in the 90s as a child, you have known the Rambo series from Sylvester Stallone. And you see it when there are Rambo cards in 1993, then you know Rambo was also spectacular back then. Because they put the films every year out, and so we also knew Rambo as a kid. So really, really nice. And you see here we had on Sylvester Stallone. Here we had on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, what was his film here? Arnie. New pictures to his new film. Then DuckTales. And here we have Hollywood Monster. Yeah. And the Harley, what was it? Yeah, Harley Davidson, I think. You see that? and Lego, yeah, I see it. I have this thing, Lego system, yeah, Lego still is alive. Exactly that I have here, yeah, that I also got. And so you see, these were the stuffs what we needed as childs. But now let's look what was it for film. Yeah, you see, Action Limit. Which one is here? The Macho Man, Randy Savage. Yeah, you could, I don't know, something you got when nowadays you have email or such things. Back then you have to make your name on, go to the post office. But you see, wrestling was always a part of the 90s. But which film was it from Sly Stallone? From Arnold Schwarzenegger? We have to watch. Here we have in Terminator 2. Yeah. But I don't know which film they meant in the Gremlins. Yeah. Frisbee. That was also a part. You see that Frisbee? I told you, they put in sports. And Frisbee in the early 90s was also a meaningful thing. Everyone as a kid had a Frisbee at home. And we played this. Later on it became a sport. Nowadays I think there are championships. But Frisbee was very, very popular. And that was our magazine where you knew what is in as a child. Because there was no internet and other thing. You were not connected to the world. And this was our connection. You see Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and of course, maybe you have seen it, the Hulkster, Hulk Hogan was also on there. These were the guys which were in Hulk Hogan. And football, yeah, all about about Yeboah. I don't know Yeboah. In football I was not a big deal. But I have seen also the World Championship in 1994. I know that exactly. I was in Mallorca. Yeah, 1994 in Mallorca when the World Championship was. And there was Italy against Brazil. Yeah, and I was completely for Italy. And I know we watched it beside the swimming pool. And then we went up to our flat. In the they made the normal minutes and then it went on in the overtime, I think it's called, and then there was the 11 meter in English, yeah, and Roberto Baggio, the last one, shot the ball away. That was my favorite player. Unbelievable. And Brazil won. Really, really crazy. So here the Hulkster is in, Jimmy Hart, Brutus the Barber, Beefcake. So, where do we have it? The Hulkster. He conquers Germany. Here with Daddy Biassi. You see, that was all in there. So, and what film was it back then? It was Papa Shango is in there. Now in cinema, Hulk Hogan as Mr. Babysitter. Yeah, Mr. Babysitter. That film I can remember. Yeah, really, really nice. So we have, you see, another thing. And also another side, all with the Hulkster in. Yeah. So, and these were the heroes. And also Mr. D from A-Team. Yeah, he was also a hero. Jean-Claude Van Damme was also there. And these were the guys. Yeah, maybe Chuck Norris. But Stallone, the Hulkster, Mr. D from the A-Team. And Arnold Schwarzenegger. These were the big heroes as a boy, as a child. Yeah, and so with the films, I can also make a difference because now we come to the films from Stallone and such things. Here we have it, Demolition Man. What was this for great film back then? And so I can tell you another thing, why the early 90s and the late 90s. Because in the early 90s, we had the VHS cassettes, and in the late 90s we had the DVDs. Yeah, I have also here one. So here VHS were those big things for young people, those cassettes. You had a cassette player like a DVD player, but also DVD, or now UHD player, yeah, Blu-ray player, UHD player. Young people, someone don't know this stuff. They never had a DVD in their hands, they never had a UHD in their hands, and never had a Blu-ray in their hands. They don't know nothing about that because now all is streaming and YouTube, yeah. But this is all about why this can be dangerous, because you never know if this is the original part or not. With AI, everything you can change. But those VHS cassettes, these were the 80s thing and the early 90s thing. The thing was, the more often you have watched it, the better the quality went. And when you have watched it too often, then the colors went away. It was like this, how it's called, not blurry, and you know what I mean, das bam bam bam, which is really went ugly. And so you could not watch this again. And also you had a button where it was, when you go forward or backwards, that needed time, yeah. And so that was crazy. And also this could break. Then you had a problem because it was here, you see there is a band in, and sometimes it was click, and when that was cut it out, then for almost every people you could put this to garbage. Yeah, you could repair it, but the normal people didn't know it, yeah, so then it was over. These were the cassettes back then, VHS. To the middle 90s, around 96, 7, 8, and around 1997, 8, I think, the DVD entered in very big, and then it didn't take long and the VHS was completely away. And then you only had the DVDs, better quality, it was much easier to go to a next chapter, yeah, that was great. But DVDs also get damaged, yeah. I tell you what, I have VHS cassettes here, which are better than the DVDs, yeah. And we had also, these were the VHS what you could buy, and there was also empty VHS cassettes you put in your recorder when you had one, and then you could record the television program. And also these cassettes work sometimes better than my old DVDs. But there we come also then why there is a problem, because there are some DVDs which are damaged. After 12-15 years they are damaged. Then you have also a problem. So Demolition Man, Wesley Snipes with Sylvester Stallone. Really, I can remember there were the movie magazines, yeah. TV Spielfilm in Germany, and this film always got almost the most points of all films. They always had for action 3 points, for adventure 3 points, for erotic 3 points, and I don't know for what else. And you always was watching how many points has this film, how many points this, wow. And this film, I remember this exactly, had always one of the most points of all films back then. Demolition Man, an absolute action classic. That was also about the action classic films. That was really crazy. Then I have another film, but I haven't seen it in the 90s, I think. So, camera overheated, sorry. You will know it from the other parts. I don't have another camera than the action cam, and this is overheating. So we go on. Pretty Woman, I have watched it now, 1990, so I remembered it. The early 90s, one of the most meaningful films from the 90s, and there are a lot of meaningful films, but as a boy, you didn't want to watch that film, you know. It's a classic. Richard Gere, Julia Roberts, yeah, really famous actors from the 90s, but I have not watched it as a child. Wait, I have to drink again. So, really nice. Then, I have a lot of stuff behind, but before we go to a DVD, but that DVD I got nowadays, you know. But back then that was a television series, and you see it completely in front of me in the middle. The American Gladiators. What was that for a great and cool thing? Unbelievable. To me, that was one of the best things I have seen from all stuff back then. I loved this series, you know. I was always into sports, really all the time. And here, the American Gladiators, yeah. Really, really cool. But before we go to it, I will say you now something. There were a lot of packages from DVDs, which are those small DVDs, yeah, those slim packages. And when you have those slim packages, and you have this a long time at home, the chances are good that those DVDs don't work anymore. And I will tell you why. I have a lot of DVDs. Yeah, I don't want to say names or numbers, but believe me, I have a lot of DVDs. The problem is, with those slim packages, that the DVD most of the time is laying completely on the plastic. Yeah, and I had it, for example, on the Knight Rider DVDs. There I had the complete series, really a big thing, and all those slim DVDs. And then after all those years, I watched it and I thought, what is this? Because normally I always was careful, you know. Many people weren't careful, and it looked like as there was standing a bottle on and was going out, yeah, with the with like a Fanta or a Sprite, what is so, you know, like a glue feeling. And that it looked, I also see it now when I watch in there, I see it a little bit. But I never got on with the fingers or anything, you know, and I always cleaned it. The problem what I have read then is, in the normal packages, not in the slim ones, it has a little bit space to the plastic, but not in those ones. They are lying completely on there, and I'm not a chemician, but I have read that there is a chemical process, and it damaged your DVD. And then it looks like you have put on a Sprite, a Fanta, and all that stuff with the fingers, yeah, and then it is damaged. And what happens there when it's damaged? You cannot go, yeah, maybe you can go to the menu, you can watch 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and then bam, it ends and it goes back to the menu. So you have never a chance to watch from that point on and all such things. And that happens to the DVDs, especially to those ones, yeah. So that is really bad, because on the VHS cassettes, what I have it back in there. There, we go on. There I don't have the problem. Yeah, really, I have the VHS cassettes from around 1991, but not original ones. VHS, what we recorded for our own, and they still run. Yeah, can you imagine that? And DVDs are maybe from 2002, 2003, and nowadays they are damaged. Yeah, so yeah. And here we had also a paper in, an American Gladiator, so I put it in again. That was the real deal. That was so cool as a kid. I don't know on which channel it was running here in Austria or in Germany. Wow, what channel was this? Was it DSF? Nah, in the early 90s there was no DSF. DSF, I think, was around the middle 90s to late 90s. I cannot tell you on what channel this was, but doesn't matter. That was so cool. If you don't know it, maybe you know now the Ninja Warriors. And I call always the Ninja Warriors is the part 2 of the American Gladiators. This is how they started it. And they had, you always had 2 contenders in. Yeah, we put it on there, or I hold it in the hand. We had 2 contenders, 2 men, and also 2 women. And these were the American Gladiators. And they had a few disciplines what they had to do. One, for example, was staying on a platform. Yeah, that was a small platform. And the other one on the other one. The American Gladiator and here the man what was competing. And then they had like a, how it's called, I will not see it now, like a, not a steel but from plastic with a boxing glove like this, and they had to punch the other out, and the person who falls down first has lost. And so they got points, and at the end they had a big parkour, and then you see which man had won and if he beats the American Gladiators or not. And they had such cool sport events, yeah, that was really, really crazy. You needed stamina, you needed strength, and that was so cool to watch. So this was really an early 90s thing. I think from 1990 to 1996, around that time, they have produced the American Gladiators. And one of the heroes was Nitro, yeah. You will not see it that much now, but Nitro with the long black hair, that was fantastic. They had also the rings, yeah. You had to go from one side to the other side only by rings, yeah. The rings from gymnastics. But on the other side was waiting the American Gladiator, and he was coming to you, and then he tried, when you were not fast enough, he went to you and tried that you fall down. And so this was really, really cool games. And by the woman it was the same. And I always liked Zap, yeah, by the woman, the American Gladiator female Zap, yeah, with Zap. Wow, that was so amazing. I loved this. I always wanted to compete there. So when you loved sport, back then the American Gladiators, they went up like crazy. That was such a cool thing. So I ordered this from the US, yeah. And this is an NTSC DVD. The problem was it didn't run on my DVD player. Only on the PC, when you have changed a little bit, then it ran. And nowadays you have all episodes on YouTube, yeah, in better quality maybe than this. So really, really crazy. Yeah, but American Gladiators. And now Ninja Warrior, this is more athletic, yeah. This is really athletic. Back then that was more with show element. Was really at the right time, at the right place. They really hit it perfect. So then we have another one, but this I think not many people like this. But as a child I loved this. But I think the more grown up teenagers or the adults, they didn't like that because it had not the best reviews then. But as a child, this was amazing. Maybe you will know it now. I only say Thunder in Paradise. So the wrestling fans will know it. Hulk Hogan in the series Thunder of Paradise. He was the main character, and they always had this boat. When you see this nowadays, you think, oh my gosh, what is that? I think some private person can make better effects now at home than back then, but back then it was this. And all wrestling fans as a kid, when you have known, wow, Hulk Hogan makes a series, wow, is this great? And with this Thunderbolt, that was really cool. I liked it a lot, yeah. And there were also, I have here all DVDs. It was running on television back then. I think it was on RTL in Germany or RTL 2, when I remember it right, yeah. So, yeah, that was a cool thing. Thunder in Paradise. I think not many people nowadays will know that series. Maybe you can watch it. So, Thunder in Paradise. But you have to imagine it was, I don't know when it was made. There's only the DVD date. I think it was around 1995, 1994, 1996, maybe around that. I think it was produced. So you have to go back and imagine that there was not that much technique involved than nowadays. So, and then later on, we had some other stuffs, you know, there were a lot of sitcoms, we talked about that, but one sitcom, you know, there was Who is the Boss? Yeah, in English, Wer ist hier der Boss? In German it was called, with Tony Dancer. Tony Dancer was also such a cool character, but we talked about all those sitcoms, you know, like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with Will Smith, early 90s to middle 90s. That was also so cool. Then with Ed O'Neill, with how it's called in English. In Germany it was El Bundy. You know, when you say El Bundy, everyone knows it. Eine schrecklich nette Familie in German, but I don't know how they called it in English. They have always other names. Was it called El Bundy or other name? I don't know. But that was a classic. And then when all those classic sitcoms, there were a lot more, yeah, Bill Cosby and Steve Urkel and so much more, yeah, I cannot name now all, but then one entered in, because you always thought in the late 90s, wow, what sitcom will come there which can make really a top spot like all those famous sitcoms from the early to middle 90s. Which one will be the next big thing? Will there come something? And then one came, and I think this is really an absolute classic. And I don't have season 1 because I only think season 1 was made in the late 90s. Season 2 and all others were then in the early 2000s. So I have season 2 here for an example, but it was season 1. Maybe you will know it now. That was really, I can say it is a classic nowadays. It is the King of Queens. Yeah, King of Queens. Really, that was so amazing. Even when it came out, yeah, with, I think, Leah Remini, Kevin James, Arthur, yeah, the name from him in the series. And believe me or not, when this came out, yeah, a lot of people, what I know, have said, no, this cannot compete with El Bundy, this cannot compete with that, no. But I really, in the late 90s, I knew, or early in the 1999 or 2000, when I see this, I've seen this, I knew immediately this will be an absolutely top highlight thing. And nowadays it is a classic. King of Queens is classic, you know. It is in one line with all the other sitcoms. So I enjoyed this a lot because I knew back then you are right there when something big will happen. You know, when they have season 1, you will not know, is this over after one season? Is it only one of thousands of things? Or you know you are complete at the right time when it is in their life. Yeah. So I was living in there and knew there happened something big. So King of Queens, always a classic. And then we go also on to a DVD, but these were not on DVD back then because it was in the early 90s and also in the 80s. But this is a 90s classic and I will tell you why. So it is the Flodders. I don't know if they are famous in America, but the Flodders in Middle Europe, when you lived back then, they are classic. Really a classic. Absolutely fantastic. And those were the films, and there also existed a series. Maybe some people will not know this. Which are born later and they have seen it. Wow, that was cool. So, camera overheated again, sorry. We go on. So, there were the films and 3 parts, you know, 3 films, and there also existed a series with the Flodders, yeah, where they made, I don't know, 40 or 50 series with around 30 minutes or 20-30 minutes or 40 minutes, I don't know exactly. So you have difference. And that not all know, they think there were only the 3 films, but no, there exists a series. So really nice. The first film was in the 80s. Yeah, they made it in the 80s. And if you don't know it, maybe most people who watch my videos are from the US. So those films were made in the Netherlands, in Europe, in the Netherlands. And here this was really, really popular. And the thing was, this was it's not a comic series, a real film with real characters. And this was a family, what was like, how can you call it, you know, a trash family, you know, a garbage family. I don't know how you call this in English, but back then it was so, a family what is complete the opposite what people wish for. And they lived in the best area, yeah, where all the rich people, where all was clean, nothing dirty, nothing loud. The garden were really nice everywhere with swimming pools, you know. There were lawyers and all big men like in the 90s who had money. And then a family comes which makes dirt, which makes noise, which has not much on, which steals and all that stuff. You know what I mean? They entered in, and that was the part always. But they were a nice family, and that was a classic. And they had kids in there, they had old people in there in the family, and real characters. Yeah, they all had characters, and so this was a big deal, especially as a teenager. I think everyone as a teenager or young adult loved the Flodders. And part 2, you know, but these were all these were all separate films, you know, not film 1 and the next film is the same, but only again, no, they were completely different, you know, part 1 different, part 2 the film, and part 3 the film. And part 2 and 3 were made in the 90s. And they had one, the most meaningful character in there was Johnny Flodder, the main guy from the family. Yeah, Johnny Flodder, absolutely amazing with his haircut. And I think why almost everyone has watched it also as a man was Case Flodder. Case Flodder was the girl in the family. And she was, I will not see it now. I don't see it now. But that was really an attraction for the men back then. Not much on, and they have put it into the scenes also, you know, with erotic things. That was fantastic. And she was called Case Flodder, yeah, and they were talking in the Netherlands, how it's called, yeah, Netherlands language, or how it's called, yeah. But you know, we watched it in Germany, also in German language, but maybe some people or many people will not know it. Case Flodder, she's original from Croatia. Yeah, her real name is Tatjana Simic. Yeah, Tatjana Simic, born in Zagreb, Croatia. So that many I don't think will know. And she was also then, she tried to sing, yeah, and really, really good. When you watch her nowadays, yeah, she almost looks the same like back then. I think no tattoos, very clean, very normal. And back then you thought, wow, that family, they must be crazy. Yeah? And now in real part, really, really nice, really normal people. And Case Flodder really was original from the 90s. In the US, I don't know if you have seen it, one part, they made it in New York. There was one called in English, I would say it, A Family to Kiss in Manhattan, New York. I don't know the name there. But in the US, you had the other part. That was the opposite part of them. They tried the same with a family in the US, like here in Europe. These were the European, the original Flodders. In the US, they were called the Griswolds. You know, the Griswolds is almost the same. When you like the Griswolds, then go for these 3 films. Here I have all 3 in there, yeah. On a Blu-ray, go for it, yeah. A classic, like the Griswolds. And then they made the series. And also about this, maybe you have seen that when you watch this and never have known it. But the thing is, Johnny Flodder in film 1 and in film 2 was the other Johnny Flodder what has played the role, you know, other actor than in part 3 and the series. In part 1 and 2 it was Huub Stapel. Yeah, Huub Stapel was the actor for Johnny Flodder, and in part 3 it was another actor, and this actor from part 3, you may see it when you watch exactly, they look the same, but it's a little bit of other movement from Johnny Flodder, and in the series was the same actor like in part 3, and this actor from part 3 has died then, I think in 1997, and it was, when I'm right, I cannot guarantee it, but I remember that it was on the set when they made the series, that he got a heart attack or such a thing, and then they put the complete series down, yeah. But yeah, an absolute classic. So the series, if you liked it and never have seen the series, watch it. All other characters are the same, only the kids are sometimes other. But Case Flodder was there, the mother was there, Johnny Flodder, and Klaus, you know, the brother of Johnny was Klaus. So an absolute classic in the early 90s to middle 90s. So here we have it. And then I have to watch that. We got it. Where was it? Yeah, I put it on here now. Then there was another thing, a German classic in the early 90s. Yeah, I think that was especially for for teenagers and young adults, especially men. I think almost really have watched this film. It was a comic with a little bit real characters in. Yeah, it was mixed. And when I say a classic, early 90, I think 1990 or 1991, then the German people will know it now. It was called Werner Beinhart, and still an absolutely classic. Yeah, in the US, I think you will not know it, but if you like films, like how can you call it, like the Flodders and such style things, Werner Beinhart. Absolutely a classic in Germany. So back then, everyone has seen the film Werner Beinhart. Really crazy. So yeah, here we have the films. And now we will go on a little bit with games now. Yeah, then we come to music, and then we come to sport. Then we have a lot of mixed up. Yeah, and of course there were other films, so many, you know, that would take weeks that we can make it, but we have time, we make all a little bit with no hurry. So games, what was back then? I told you, gaming was a golden era, the 90s. Why? Because in the late 80s, there it went all up with Nintendo, with the Master System of Sega. Those two were competing, Sega. Many people will not know it now. Sega was back then the big deal. Nowadays, we have the PlayStation from Sony, the PlayStation 5, the Xbox, and Nintendo. But back then it was a battle between Nintendo and Sega. There was no PlayStation in the early 90s. There was no Xbox. There was a way. Only Nintendo and Sega. And who wins the battle? And that was really a part. I think when you were a child, you were a Nintendo fan or you were a Sega fan. I don't think many people had both systems there, especially in really early 90s. I don't know, but as a kid you got one console and that it was. You could not say, I want also the other console and this. No, maybe you had one. I think many people, but also some had more. But it was really decide, I'm a Sega fan or I'm a Nintendo fan. And when you were a Nintendo fan, you say, oh, Nintendo is the best, the games are better, the console is better, no Sega. Yeah, you didn't want to have a Sega. And also on the other side, I have Sega, Sega is the best, the games are better, I don't want Nintendo. Yeah, and they had the games like nowadays, it changed a little bit, but on Sega the main character was Sonic. Sonic was the hero on Sega, and on Nintendo it was Mario. Yeah, Mario was the hero. And so we had two characters, Mario or Sonic. Who is better? Mario games back then had a lot longer gameplay, a lot more levels and all that stuff. And Sonic was much shorter. but it was always called the fastest game what you can enter. The Blue Eagle is running and all that stuff. And so they had advertisement on television. Yeah, you could watch that all the things, and that was the time when it entered up. Yeah, and almost the kids and young teenagers had those consoles in. I think older people never had this in. Yeah, so that was really the growing up from all that stuff. And I had my first console, what I had was a Game Boy from Nintendo. It was the handheld, the original one. I think I got it around 1990, yeah? Exactly in this room here. When I watched to the sofa back there I got it at Christmas. The Game Boy, I think I told this. The Game Boy and the game Tetris was there. Tetris was the absolute classic back then. And the wrestling game, WWF. I know they don't know the original name, but you could play the Undertaker, and that was crazy in a cage match. So Game Boy was the first, but the first normal console for television was in 1991 what we got, and that was also at Christmas on the other flat, not here, with Sonic 1. So I'm a Sonic fan since it started, yeah, with Sonic 1 on the Mega Drive, right, all was coming in, and that was fantastic. And since then I have played every big Sonic game to the end. Only one, and that was Sonic and the Secret Rings, but that was such a bad game. But all I have played completely. Also the Sonic Heroes. I didn't like the game back then, but nowadays, a year ago or so, I played it also to the end. Yeah. So, gaming and the Mega Drive, I can tell you, there were magazines, and for Sega you had the Gamers. Maybe many people will know it now. The magazine called Gamers. It was only for Sega, and that was a dream. It was in the early 90s, I think, to the middle 90s, and then they have to close it. And that magazine was fantastic, and they told that they have nothing to do with Sega, so they can write their own opinion. You know, they are not sponsored from Sega, and I think from Nintendo the magazine was sponsored from Nintendo, and so they always had to say this game is so good and this and that. And in the Gamers magazine they write it really critical and could say what they want. But as a child, you know, I didn't know that exactly, but it was the only information to see, wow, what games are coming up. Can you imagine that nowadays? That was the only chance where you have seen it. You bought this magazine. I think they put out 2 in 1 month, later 1 per month when I'm right. And there wow, the new Sonic comes, Sonic 2. I remember that time. That was crazy. You have seen what? There is Tails by you. Sonic and Tails. The levels, wow, how are they looking? Yeah, before Sonic 2 went out, I remember that exactly. So the Gamers was my favorite magazine back then, because I was a Sega fan. And also there was I think, that because I always had this in my mind, the Sega Mega Drive was technically better than the Super Nintendo. I think both have 16-bit, but there was one time that the Mega Drive has 16-bit and the Nintendo only 8-bit. Yeah, 8-bit system. And that was, no, they cannot be. That was really a war game back then. Yeah, Sega or Nintendo. That was really, really crazy. And so I had a lot of Mega Drive games. Yeah, a lot. What is a lot? Nowadays they will say when you have hundreds of games were a lot. But I had around 15 games. They were expensive. I think you paid up to 1,000 shilling. And it was back then really a big deal. So you only got a game as a kid, maybe on your birthday, and maybe one at Christmas. That it was. So you had not that much games, but back then it was a lot of games. So that was the first game what I got, Sonic. Yeah. An absolutely classic Sonic 1 16-bit on Mega Drive. These were cartridges. They still work. Believe me that. This is the original one from 1991, I think. Because here in Europe we were always later when the game came out, 1991. And here you see, this is the original cartridge. Yeah, you had to put in. Still works fine. Yeah, still works fine. I tell you, I have other games. There we are again, like DVDs. When they have a little bit on there in the background, they didn't work anymore. So Sonic 1, I played this always in the morning, at weekend. Fantastic. I had Asterix. I also loved this game. I also played this game a lot in the shopping malls. Here we had the big shopping malls, yeah, to buy food, to buy clothes, to buy electronic, to buy all stuff, you know, cigarettes were in the all different shops, and they had called in the Dates. Maybe there are some from Austria, from my city, in the Dates shopping mall. In the old Dates, that looked completely different than the nowadays Dates. They had on in the first floor that was called Quelle. Yeah, Quelle. There was also the catalog where you could buy all stuff, clothes, electronics, sports, and shoes and all that stuff. And on there, behind, they had two televisions. So you know it, camera overheated again. But what shall I do? I don't have the money for another camera. I had to sell all my cameras because of money problems, but yeah, it is what it is. So in this shopping mall there was the Quelle, and there they had two television, and I was playing there hours for hours almost every day, because my mother was always in there to drink something in a bar, and I had to run all day long until they closed at night in the shopping mall. Yeah. And there we played and played and played. That was crazy. And so I knew the games. And then later on they had in the normal floor, I think it was a Hartlauer or Niedermeyer electronic shop from here. And they also had the television in there and then outside. And I played there so much. And there was the game Asterix, this game. Here you see 999 shilling, 999 shilling. The prices were crazy back then. It was so much money. And there was always a level, I knew it, where people didn't know how to get far this level, yeah, to make it. And I knew it. And when I came in there as a boy, I said, I can make it, let me play. And I did it. That was crazy. And I was there. In those things, in this shopping mall, there were a lot of things. I knew where to go, but I was staying there so long, even when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. Yeah, the sellers from those shops came to me and said, I'm not allowed to come here. I have to play other people. Yeah, I cannot play here hours. And so I was sometimes scared, but then I went to the other shop, I went back then and I played and I played and played. That was amazing, you know, really a cool time. And so I had a lot of games. I don't see it now. Aquatic games. This one, I enjoyed this also. Yeah, there was a real game what I have known later on, but I only knew these aquatic games. You could do, you know, I'm into sports. You could do a lot of sports there. I enjoyed it. You know, I was never good in the game because I didn't know how to get better or what is the goal in this game, but I enjoyed it. A game what I got from a friend from the family was Mario Lemieux Hockey. Wow, what a great ice hockey game. That I enjoyed so much, yeah. Really, really cool. And then one game, I can tell you, is one of the best games ever. I have my 3 most favorite games from all time. They are on the Sega Mega Drive, or in the US it's called the Genesis, Sega Genesis. One is Sonic 1. The top 3 games to me personally, Sonic 1. The other one is Kid Chameleon. I told one time about this game. It come out in 1992. Kid Chameleon, yeah. an absolute outstanding game, I tell you. This is one of the toughest game from the 90s, early 90s, what was completely made. What this game made so special, nowadays when you read reviews, it was not that good and this and that, but this was the hardcore game from them all. Why? Because you didn't know how long this game is. You played it level for level. It was a little bit similar to the Mario game, You had to go to a level, you had the boxes to jump on like in Mario, little bit similar, but the thing was, you had not much control when it was jumping, when it got to a block. It was really, really tough from the controller to control it, And then it was sometimes really, really unfair what can happen. You jump from someone off and you didn't see to the ground and you was completely jumping into something what hurted you. So really, really tough. One YouTuber, I think it is 15 years ago, made a video about the game, the hardest game from them all. I don't, maybe I make a link under in my description when I find this video. That was crazy. There you see how tough this was. And the problem was you made one level, the next level, next, and it always got harder, And you never knew back then when it is finished. You played it 1 hour, 1.5 hours. You thought now it has to be over. Now when comes the end boss? You didn't realize it. And there was no YouTube, there was nothing to search, there was no smartphone. You had no a connection to someone who has done it. So you never knew it, how much levels there are. And the problem was, sometimes you couldn't reach the end of the level. There was always a white flag. Sometimes you got a platform and that entered you into another level. And you know what I mean? It's not one level, next. No. The problem also was there was one level to such point and then it started again. And then you knew the levels went much more harder. And like a little bit same levels, but harder. And you thought, what is this now? How many things are there again? And sometimes you got to the platform and you entered in another level. It was called elsewhere and such things. And there was one, and these were the hardcore crazy levels. When you entered in there, it was almost game over. You had nothing to save. You couldn't save it. You had some lives. Maybe you find some medals. Then you get a continue or a life. But you went game over. And in these extreme platform levels, I call it now, the chance that you lost every life, that was crazy. Then you were game over. And really, I had a friend of my mom back then, he played the whole day. Sometimes from the morning, 5, 4, 6 hours. Why so long? You achieved 1 hour, all levels, and then you went game over. Then you had to start complete from beginning. Again, and when you went game over, back then, and so 5, 6 hours. And when there was the television like here, we were not allowed to go through the television. We had to grab that you can watch to the television. Then you know how fanatic we were into this game. And he also couldn't do it. And he was really good. He played Sonic 1 to the end. No problem. But Kid Chameleon was crazy. And there was one level which is absolutely legendary. They called it maybe the hardest level from the 90s. Of course, later on there were a lot of hard levels, but in the Mega Drive, really that had a big name, believe me that. Bloody Swamp. The level is called Bloody Swamp. This is unbelievable. I tell you, there were, of course, hundreds of people out there, thousands of people, when they went into this level and they had, 30 lives, they lost every life. No chance to do it. That was such an unfair level. You had to make it perfect. Nowadays you can how it's called, you can exercise it, because you have now save points. Yeah, I watch a YouTube video, they jump so, what is the dip? Yeah, I try again. But back then, you went hours for hours to this level, then you had 20 lives, 15 lives, 10 lives, 30 lives, I don't know. And they were over quickly. Bam, bam, over, bam, bam, over. You know how difficult this was. And so you never knew how much levels there come. That was crazy. So many levels. And then the last boss, this unbelievable game. So Kid Chameleon, still one of my favorite games. And I tell you another thing. Later on they made a Mega Drive collection on the PlayStation and other stuffs. And there was Kid Chameleon one time in, and this game is complete other playable than back then. When you played on the Mega Drive with the original controller, much more harder, complete other from the jumping than on the other system. So you cannot compare it the same. If you want it for real, go to a Mega Drive with the real controllers and play it there. Yeah, and then you will see how difficult this is. But on the other side, nowadays we are more experienced. We have played games for decades now. You have a complete other mindset, what is possible, what you can do. But back then you didn't have it because it was the first time out, the beginning of the golden era. And so other games what I had was Wrestle War, an absolute great wrestling game. That was cool, yeah, Wrestle War, really cool. And the other thing was, of course, Super WrestleMania, yeah, the WWF. You had the Warrior, British Bulldog, Papa Shango. I don't know why they had Papa Shango in, but Shawn Michaels, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, and I don't know which one. But I almost like Wrestle War more than WrestleMania, yeah. That DiBiase, Irwin R. Scheister was in there, so great. Another game, now I put it on there, was Tasmania. This was also, I think, on the cover of the Gamers magazine, Tasmania. You could make the wirbel, I don't know, a spinning move. Really a nice game, I enjoyed it. That game I didn't have, a friend of mine from school had it, and I played it back then, and that is a classic. Every kid, especially boys from the early 90s, has played this because this was also on the Super Nintendo. And it is called a classic, beat them up, Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 in the early 90s, I think every kid has played this, yeah. That was really fantastic. Street Fighter 2, what a legendary. When you know this game and remember it back how it was, fantastic. So then we go to another one, Quackshot. Yeah, I only had this from Donald Duck, Quackshot. One of also my favorite game, not the top 3, but I enjoyed this game so much. Quackshot, still I enjoy it. Sometimes I play it to the end. Really, really nice. And then, of course, Sonic 2. Yeah, the headers, wow, that was also crazy when that went out. Very, very nice, yeah. And I had a lot of other games, but I don't have here. And now, the third game in my top 3 from all time, from all consoles, Sonic 1, Kid Chameleon, and Wonder Boy in Monster World. I didn't have this game back then, but my friend, my mom's friend, had the other friend. There we change games sometimes, to have it 2 weeks, 3 weeks. He got one and we got one. There we got, for the first time, Wonder Boy Monster World. And I loved this game immediately. The problem was I couldn't speak English, As a child, I learned French because I had an old school teacher, a female, and she couldn't talk English. So we learned French back then. And there you had to read. It's like, you had to read a lot in English. If you couldn't read English, you had a problem. But I enjoyed that so much. There were a lot of other parts. Yeah, there exists a few. I have almost played them all now. I like them all. But Wonder Boy Monster World, a classic. So this is to me a top 3 game, and later on I bought it for the Mega Drive. Yeah, absolutely, to me, outstanding. I still love it. I could play that every year. I can play it to the end. I enjoy it, but I know everything now, where everything is, but cool. And then the Game Boy games, I only have a few here. I had a lot of Game Boy games, but I say Kirby's Dream Land. Yeah, Kirby, in the middle 90s, I think Kirby was a big name for the Nintendo. So there I had a lot of things. And also I think in English, the Smurfs, die Schlümpfe. There were so many games, yeah. And also the Schlümpfe for the Mega Drive, one of the hardest games of them all for Mega Drive. Absolutely a hardcore game. I played it to the end, but I never had it on the Mega Drive. I bought this, I think 10 years ago. I bought it for the Mega Drive. But I had it for the Game Boy. And here, where do we have it? I have to watch now. Do I have it here? No, I don't have it here. There was another game. Yeah, it doesn't matter now. But here we have one which is also legendary. Mortal Kombat. Yeah, Mortal Kombat on the Game Boy. There was Mortal Kombat, and then I think the blue package Mortal Kombat 2. And I remember it. Mortal Kombat 2, when I got it on the game. So once again, camera overheated. Yeah, you know already the problem. So Mortal Kombat 2, yeah, the blue package, I remember. I got this game, I put it out at night, I remember that exactly, put it in the Game Boy, and really, from start to finish, I competed all. I made it to the finish in the first evening, yeah. It was crazy, because I saw a very difficult game to me back then, and then in the first night when I played it, it was always... I made it to 100, or not 100%, but I made the last boss. Yeah, so one day, one game and over. And there I had a lot of games for the Game Boy. I never had the Game Boy Color. I think it was coming out in the late 90s or around 1997, 8 or 6, 7, 8. But I never had it, but that was crazy. Later on, I got the Game Gear from Sega, because Game Gear was in color long time before the Game Boy had in color the things, yeah. But the Game Gear never went that up, yeah. But for the Game Boy, I had a lot of games, but never the Mario games, yeah. So I had, I don't know, there were a lot of games, yeah. So that was gaming. Nintendo, Sega, and then you can also say there the early 90s and the late 90s, because then around the middle 90s, I think 1995 or 6 it was, the PlayStation went into the game, yeah, and that is crazy. Oh, now PlayStation, Sony is one of the biggest in the game, and back then they started with PlayStation 1, and when this came out, that was a crazy time, yeah. I got it, I think I told this, in 1996, 7, around that time I got it, and there also was in Mallorca, yeah, again in Mallorca, or no, in Marbella. I know it was in Marbella, I think. Yeah, in Marbella it was, so it was in Spain, in Marbella. And I always called at home to my grandmother, was my dad here? Had he brought the PlayStation to my birthday? And so on, and then I got it, and PlayStation was amazing again, yeah. So the 90s, the Mega Drive, the Super Nintendo was there in the early 90s, and then the PlayStation went in and took all over, yeah, that was crazy. So gaming was a big part in the 90s. And then, of course, we had the music in there. Now we come a little bit to music, to concerts, yeah. We have a little bit music behind. I don't know what runs, a little bit 90s. But so yeah, in the 90s there were a lot of great musicians who had big names. I have a few of them now here with concerts. We started, of course, there. It was He-Man, yeah. What was falling on chair was yeah, really character in the 90s. Yeah, Cher, amazing. Um, uh, I was not that much into music in the 90s, but all my people were into music to watch, you know. All in my family, all were into music. But I can tell you, this is Extravaganza live from the Mirage in Las Vegas. Yeah. From 1992, when I'm right, yeah, it was, yeah, 1992. The concert was amazing concert from Cher. Wow. Cher at her best. Really, really, yeah, big deal. 19 names. There were Cher, there was Madonna. Yeah, there were so many names in music. You cannot name them all. I have a few here, few classics. This is a classic, absolutely classic concert. Then we go on to the late 90s. Of course, we have Prince. You know, not only the 80s, also the 90s. Prince, that was the rave until the year 2000, the Sylvester party into the year 2000 in his home in Minneapolis, yeah, in his studios in Minneapolis. Yeah, great concert, you know. Lenny Kravitz was there, duet where they song American Woman, and George Clinton was there. Yeah, really nice. I think Rosie Gaines was also there, or? Yeah, Rosie Gaines was there. Yeah, a master, you know, a master. I don't want to tell too much, because when I start with music, believe me, then we can talk 1 year. So I don't want to make not a lot of things now. Then, where do we have it? Michael Jackson, of course, was also, yeah, a name in the pop in the 90s, not only 80s. Michael Jackson live in Bucharest, you know. Legendary concert, you know, when he entered in there and jumped up at the start of the concert. He jumps out, he makes no movement, nothing, and people were falling down, you know. They're falling asleep because they are so excited. So Michael Jackson, it was amazing. And then one move and people went crazy, you know. Yeah, I cannot say too much now, because yeah, music is a other part, you know, it's a complete other part. But that Michael Jackson also in the 90s. And then a legendary other concert, what was there, you know, there were a lot of names and a lot of stuff. There was Joe Cocker, Phil Collins. Yeah, there was so many genres, you know, but the big names. And then one legendary concert in 1992. We were in England, you know. We come now to England. Maybe someone was in there, in the old good Wembley Stadium. Here we have it, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. This is on VHS, and I know these concerts since the early 90s. We watched it exactly in this room, and so loud that you hear it, I don't know, to the house is far away. So loud we had it on. VHS, 2 cassettes, the whole concert in there. And Freddie Mercury was from Queen. Young people maybe don't know it. Queen, one of the most legendary rock bands which were out there. And Freddie Mercury is one of the most charismatic guys in the music game until today. Yeah, and he died because of AIDS, you know. And back then that was the new thing what was coming up. So Freddie Mercury, I can tell you, an absolutely genius, yeah, really a genius. The voice of him, amazing, you know. I can tell you, I have talked with opera singers, you know, with real opera singers. They told me also Freddie Mercury really great. And yeah, when he died, this was really tragic, because the people didn't know those virus, what was going on. And Freddie Mercury was a lot of times in Germany, in Munich, in the clubs, you know, in the gay scene and all that stuff. And here in Austria, yeah, we have a guy who made, he's, what I know, the last guy who filmed Freddie Mercury in front of a camera, and he was the guy who made the biggest music videos in the game, an absolutely legend in our country, and his name is Rudi Dolezal. You know, you will read it a lot of times, Doro, back then on the videos. Doro, what does this mean? Rudi Dolezal, so the D and the O was for Dolezal, and the RO was for Rossacher. Yeah, Dolezal and Rossacher, those two were the game, and they worked with the big names in the game, you know. And Rudi Dolezal, he knew, I think, Private, Tina Turner. He was sitting in there for the in the Commie Day, I think it's called in English, in America, when Sheila E. was at the same time in. When you win a Grammy Award, you can enter in the for the judgment, or you know, in the background, and there was Sheila E. in there from Prince, and so he know all that stuff, you know. Why? Because Prince didn't want to make interviews, you know, for Rudi Dolezal. There are a lot of stories what I can tell you, and Dolezal was in there, and he was the last guy who filmed Freddie Mercury in front of the camera, you know. And so he knew a lot of things what was going on. And so this was the tribute concert for Freddie Mercury. And some or many of the biggest names in the game back then were in the old Wembley Stadium. And I call it one of the greatest and most meaningful concerts which was ever held up to, you know, until today. And there was Brian May in. Brian May was the guitarist of Queen back then, you know. And the names what was in there, that was the who of all names. Of course, there were a lot of other names which were not involved, but to make such an event happen was amazing, you know. Alone the names, you know, I don't have to read it because I know it. Elton John was in there, you know. What a name back then in the early 90s. Elton John, we had in Guns N' Roses, you know. Amazing, you know, the singer. He made a duet with Elton John back then. Then Seal was in, the old Seal with the dreadlocks. He was singing Who Wants to Live Forever. Outstanding in his white suit. You have to watch this. Wow, amazing, yeah. The voice of him by this song, the meaning what those musicians got in, you know. Roger Daltrey, you know, Roger Daltrey from The Who was in there in one song. Brian May on guitar, and on the bass guitar Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, one of the best players of all time, you know. And Roger Daltrey, the singer of The Who, amazing, you know. There were so many names, you know. George Michael is not there anymore. He was in there, yeah. Lisa Stansfield was in there, Def Leppard, and Metallica was also there. Yeah, Metallica was really there at that time, in the atmosphere, when there was someone in, amazing, yeah. So, yeah, Annie Lennox was in there, Zucchero, Paul Young, yeah. There were so many unbelievable, you know. And there was one group in there, and I tell you that I have seen one of them, and this one of the best guitarists what we have on planet Earth, from the group Extreme, you know. Many from the hard rock style back then may know it, the group Extreme, yeah. And the guitarist of it is called, you will know it, I have seen it, him live, Nuno Bettencourt, you know. Nuno Bettencourt is a guitar hero in the guitar world, and he was in there, and I have seen him later on playing live, and you know, I remember those memories that you can say, wow, I have watched one of the best when he was playing. You have to see this live, yeah. And Nuno Bettencourt back then in there with the singer of Extreme, with the long hair, jumping, real power, energy. They made it really, really good. They were friends of Mercury and Queen. Yeah, great. And the other story, Freddie Mercury, he was at Montreux, you know, Montreux. I don't know how to call it in English. We say Montreux. Yeah, Montreux. Is it called here? Montreux. Yeah, when I talk English, I pronounce it. So you know what time it is? Overheating again from the camera. So we go on. Montreux. Yeah, Montreux. This is the most meaningful music festival in the whole wide world, you know. And many young people don't know it. They never have heard the name of Montreux. And this is very, very sad. You know, Montreux is the biggest name in music from all festivals in the whole wide world. There is not another one which is more meaningful, you know. A Montreux Jazz Festival it is called, but it is only called Jazz Festival because they started with it, but later on they had all styles for music. But they didn't change the name because it didn't work. Montreux Festival, then it was always remembered as Montreux Jazz Festival. And they took the name. And the famous guy who made this festival up is Cloud Knobs. I have seen this guy live. Cloud Knobs is the founder of the Montreux Jazz Festival. And they have maybe the biggest music archive in the whole wide world. You know, because they filmed every thing from the late 80s. You know, they filmed everything on the big main stage from the Auditorium Stravinsky, it is called, the main stage. The festival goes for many, many days, always in summer, in Swiss, in Switzerland, in Swiss, at the Genfer See, And back then it was always so when a musician knew he plays Montreux, he leveled this concert up. You know, that was a prestige thing. When you play Montreux, you play one thing better than all other concerts because this is the stage where you want to be. There is nothing more meaningful than this stage, you know. Of course, we have many prestige stages, Madison Square Garden, the Wembley Stadium and other things, but Montreux Jazz Festival, I don't know if there is one stage where are all genres, so meaningful names, what played there is no other thing. And I can tell you, Microsoft was, this is said, they wanted this archive, you know, with all the live concert videos, you know, with the films. And they would have given him $50 million. $50 million. But he didn't do it, Cloud Knobs, because he loved the music so much. And I think this is one guy who knows more about music than almost anyone or everyone. I don't know how it's called. And for example, Cloud Knobs, the founder, I can tell you other thing. One of the greatest producers of all time, Quincy Jones. Young people maybe may not know the names. I can understand it because when they are born in the early 2000s, no one is telling them, you know. We are overflooded with information there, so they don't know what was meaningful, what not. We have decades of music history, so how can they know it nowadays? What is good? They hear radio and they think this is the most meaningful event ever. You know what I mean? It's very difficult for young ones when they don't have one who tells them the history of music. And back then, Quincy Jones, you know, Quincy Jones is one of the greatest producers of all time. He is most known for making it for Michael Jackson. He has worked with them all, you know. He has worked with Frank Sinatra, I think in the late 50s, early 60s. He made it in Monaco. There's also a room which is famous, Salle des Ateliers in Sporting Club Monaco, you know. Unbelievable, but it's another story. And he has worked with Aretha Franklin, you know. Alone this name, when you love music, then this is the high-end level what you can get. And Herbie Hancock, you know, wow. He has worked with them all almost. And Quincy Jones said, Montreux Jazz Festival is the Rolls Royce under the music festivals. You know, when such a name says it, then you know everything. Almost everyone was there, and the Queen didn't play at Montreux Jazz Festival, but Freddie Mercury was in Montreux, and there stands a statue of Freddie Mercury, yeah, at Montreux. And Claude Nobs was the guy, because there was Freddie Mercury at Montreux and there was David Bowie at the same time in Montreux, you know. And then Claude Nobs has phoned them and said, yeah, why can you not make work together, you know, and make something, yeah. And then Freddie Mercury and David Bowie got together and they produced Under Pressure, you know. Unbelievable, or because of Claude Nobs. And also Deep Purple, when it was burning, the casino was burning, the song was made there, you know. And also Claude Nobs was the first one who brought the Rolling Stones over there, you know, in Europe. I think they were in England, I cannot say it exactly now, but he was the guy who brought them here, yeah. And Claude Nobs has seen them all, you know. Always, he was at the end of the concert, he entered the main stage. So he has seen them all. He has seen all names who played there. Yeah, Nina Simone, Miles Davis, Prince, Seal, almost everyone was there. Yeah, this is crazy. This is really, really crazy. Many people don't know nowadays what is Montreux. They read, this guy's played Montreux. Where is Montreux? We have to Google it, you know. It's so sad. The most meaningful thing of them all. But now I don't know what I wanted to say. You see that when I talk about music, I go completely in another route. Where did we have Montreux? You know, because of the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. And Freddie Mercury was there at Montreux also. And this concert, 1992, is a legendary one, really a legendary one. What names were in there, unbelievable, yeah. And in the 90s there was another legendary concert at Wembley Stadium when we had it in Wembley, In Excess. You know, I don't know how to call it in English, but In Excess, that was also, yeah, with Michael Hutchence, also died. We never know what happened really, if he was making it for self, if it was an accident or what happened really. What I know with Michael Hutchence, the singer, very charismatic singer, you know, the band indexes went up crazy back then. But what I know, he had a fight with a taxi driver, I think, and he was falling down to his head. And after that, we know that now from boxers, from football players, Dave Mirra, BMX, when you got a lot of slams to your head, Chris Benoit in wrestling, then it changed, you know, the CED, I think it's called, the diagnosis, and it changes your character, everything, and then the people went aggressive, they are ill in the head, you know, and I think the same happened to him. He had a battle back then with, not a battle, but a word battle with Prince, what I know, Michael Hutchence, and then that can happen that the people went complete other, but you know, we don't know it for real, you know, we are outstanding people, but yeah, there were a lot of things. Also when Prince was at Montreux, you know, I tell you that Prince was there 3 times, you know, and he made more concerts, and one day when he was there, that was when Michael Jackson died in 2009, and the saga is, I think it's called the saga, he was closing him in for 1 or 2 days completely because he knew Michael Jackson died, and that must got to him so personally, yeah, and he talked there with other guy so long only about Michael Jackson, yeah, because he had so much respect for him, you know. So yeah, music is a complete other part. So we had a few here now. Where did we have it now? So Michael Jackson, Freddie Mercury concert, Cher, Prince, and there were so many others. But you know, then we can talk a whole year. So we closed the music chapter, and now the last chapter is sports. And I have two things here what I think is important for the 90s. This is the skateboard and the inline skating. Here I have an aggressive inline skate to jump, to grind, to slide, and the normal inline skates. So we start with inline skating. Inline skating in the early 90s to middle 90s, I think, was the most growing sport of them all in the whole wide world. There was no other sport which went up that crazy than inline skating. Yeah. Can you remember back in the early 90s, middle 90s, how many people you have seen making roller skating? You know, here in Europe, in the America, in that areas, it was crazy. Almost everyone wanted to roller skate. You have seen them beside the streets. There were so many inline skater. You know, call it roller skater, inline skater. I mix the names always. That was unbelievable. How many inline skaters do you see nowadays? You don't see much. You know, one a day, maybe in summer, not more. But back then that was crazy. And then it was entering in the aggressive inline sport. You know, and when you were into extreme sports like BMX, roller skating, skateboarding, that was the stuff, you know, back then. And inline skating was the biggest of them all. Bigger than skateboarding, much bigger. Bigger than BMX. There were the legendary X Games, you know. And inline skating was the biggest part. Nowadays, for people, it is they cannot imagine that, you know. Skateboarding was always the little part, yeah, for the X Games. But inline skating were amazing. And the aggressive inline skates, I have here a model, but this is from nowadays. But there were a lot of big companies. They were so famous back then, like Roches, you know, ROCES, you know, I think I have called it right, Roches in English. These were a crazy brand. And also they had normal skates and also aggressive inline skates. The difference I can show you, this is an aggressive inline skate, and they had much smaller rolls, much smaller wheels, you see, really small wheels. And there they had something to grind, to slide, and most of the times the middle wheels were smaller, yeah. And then you could grind on the rails or slide on the rails and on the latches. And here also this stuff you could slide, yeah, grind, and it was really, really cool. And the normal inline skates had big rolls, yeah, and smaller, thinner rolls that you can roll much more longer. And they were softer than those boots. They were like a ski boot. And then there was K2, you know, K2, many people will remember it in the late 90s. The K2 Fatty and K2 Fatty Pro. These were the standard aggressive inline skates what you had. The K2 Fatty was the lower one and the Fatty Pro was the more expensive one when I remember back. And this was maybe the most legendary aggressive inline company back then, USD. Yeah, this is an USD skate. I don't know where it stands now. Yeah, I don't have the name on there. Or do I see it now? Here are only small USD. Yeah, that was the gold standard back then, but it was too expensive for me. So I had the normal K2 Fatty. I liked it. And later on I buy this one, you know. I love it much more, but I have an injury on my foot and I cannot wear the normal inline skates nowadays. But in the early 90s, my first inline skate was a Roches, you know. That was a standard inline skater. That was cool. I played there in the garden out there with the other people who lived there. We played inline hockey. And here I learned it on the streets around 1991, 1992, 3. That was the time when I learned it. And in the late 90s, I made aggressive inline skating. Yeah. and jumped, and that was really, really a cool time. And if you are into inline skating, then I can tell you something. I was in there and starting it when, you know, now the names you will know it. Then you know how long I am into this game. I was in there when it all started. Brooke Howard Smith, when he entered the game. Arlo Eisenberg, Chris Edwards. These were the big names in the early 90s. Those guys made it big, you know. There are a lot of others, but there it started it, you know. I have forgotten it now. Because I have VHS cassettes, I wanted to do it here. I don't have it here now. I make a cut. I have to put in this is important. I come back now. Wait. So I'm back. I don't know what I said now. Did I say Dave Edwards, Chris Edwards, you know? There are so many names from then, but now I have them here. So I was in there when it all started. Of course, there was in the late 80s rollerblade, yeah, when they made it, but in the early 90s, aggressive inline skating went up crazy. And I tell you, I will show you now something. But I was also here in my city around 93, 94. We had a park here, what was called Fun Park. And it was outside of the Olympia Stadium. You had to pay entry there. And they had a vert ramp, you know, a wooden vert ramp, 2 mini ramps, but high ones, and a third mini ramp to the other side, a small quarter to enter in, and there a mini ramp, but a big one with a rail, and on the other side a rail, yeah. And back then, in the early 90s, when I was in there as a kid, there were only inline skaters in, really. I have only seen one skateboard, and he was in the vert ramp, yeah. So that was crazy, and scooter didn't exist then. The scooters back then also existed, but they were not scooters. They were called the snakeboarders, yeah. Maybe you remember it, snakeboarding. That was also, which was growing up, but then no one does snakeboarding anymore. That was really crazy. You couldn't do without the, where you slipped in. And when you slipped in, you could jump. But inline skaters, it was full of aggressive inline skating. And there I learned it. And so on there I entered when the big names entered the game. Brooke Howard Smith, Arlo Eisenberg, and Chris Edwards. These are 3 of the biggest names in aggressive inline skating ever. And these were the VHS cassettes what I got back then in the early 90s, middle 90s, yeah, around 94. I got this. Were very expensive, yeah, VHS, the Hawks. Yeah, well, I loved those VHS cassettes so much. The Hawks and Mad Beef and Inline Crime. Well, there you see the price, Kastner und Oehler, now Gigasport. 349 Schilling, yeah, 349 Schilling for a VHS cassette. That was crazy back then. When you are in school, you didn't have that money. But well, I love those two so much, and it is complete the other thing than nowadays. Yeah, the whole skate scene, it has all changed. Back then, a normal guy, yeah, didn't roller skate or skateboard. Yeah. They had nothing to do with that. We were complete separated. We had almost no parks. We went to the street. Yeah, the police came, or the people said you are not allowed. Go away, and this and that. You always searched the rail and stairs, and that was a cool time. The lifestyle, the music back then. Here in the aggressive inline scene, there was a lot of. Yeah, you can call it punk music. Yeah, Bad Religion was in there, Pennywise, The Offspring, Skate Nicks, yeah, Biohazard, you know, black metal style. And wow, that was crazy. That was the hardest shit back then to listen. Yeah, and they had it on there. So, and Arlo Eisenberg ran then a company with Senate. Senate was also. So growing up, you heard the name Senate. That was like maybe then in skateboarding shorties or ES, yeah, they went really crazy then. And then I had another roller skate video, aggressive inline skate video, VHS, but that was in the late 90s. I remember that was so expensive. I never could buy it, and you didn't know is this good or not. You had no YouTube, internet, nothing existed, and it was, you see it here, 419 shilling, yeah, 419 shilling, and it was really freaking, yeah. And I remember this was in the Intersport, yeah, and there, because we had no roller skating shop here, it didn't exist one here. And I always thought this, and one time I got it, and in the late 90s is complete other thing than those in America, yeah, New York and that stuff. This was in Australia, a complete other scene. I always thought, wow, the scene is completely different there in Australia. It was cool, but the music was other, I don't know, it was more like a ska music, what I remember back then. It was not my favorite one, yeah. It was cool, but yeah, my thing was this, yeah. Brooke Howard Smith, and I always say Chris Edwards, Dave Edwards, because of Dave Kolesh. Dave Kolesh was this guy, I think, with the longest trail back then. Yeah, amazing diamond. Aggressive inline was so hyped, yeah, and unbelievable. But then I think they got out of the X Games, they lost the sponsors and all that stuff, and aggressive inline fell down completely. How many aggressive inline skaters do you see in your city? When you see one guy, two guys, then wow, you have luck, you know what I mean? Nowadays, skateboarding is all over. They took all over, yeah? And skateboarding back then was not the big deal. So, roller skating we had now, and then the skateboard, yeah? Skateboard exists for a long time, you know. So, where did it start with skateboarding? This is another story, but in the 90s, skateboarding went also very, very popular. My first skateboard, I think I got in 1990, that was like a penny board today, you know, a plastic board with no grip tape, such small, the big wheels, and you could roll almost nothing because of the bad bearings. But that was my first board where I learned it. And I didn't learn it. Wait, I have to put it away. I think nowadays no one makes this anymore, because also there it changed completely. If this is good or not, you can make for your own. When you live nowadays, you don't know it other. There are skate clubs, there are skate teachers. You can buy a skate teacher. If you would have done this in the early 90s, I think they would have beaten you up. Is it good or not? Yeah, it is good, because you can learn it, and normal people can learn it. You know, normal people back then would not go to a skate park. They had nothing to do with skating. Skateboarders were the last people where you wanted to have something to do, you know. That was a culture, a lifestyle. Nowadays people drive with the car to the skate park, are in the skate park, and then they drive home, you know. It's the same with Streetball, yeah. Is it good or not? The culture back then in that way doesn't exist anymore. Of course there exists a little bit and in some areas, but it is other than back then. But the good part is more people can enter in skateboarding. They can learn it much quicker in a safe way. The parents can take their kids to a teacher. They are in a safe area, because back then, when you were there, I think that was in a lot of cities, you had all problems. The police, you made a grind, a slide, stairs, the police came, or the owners of the buildings where you were, when it was private, they were sending you away, or called the police, or were aggressive, or tried to damage your board, or to grab your board. And you have other cultures, youth cultures, who were dangerous. You know, with skateboarding you had your park or the things beside where no one entered in, and there were a lot of criminal gangs, you can call it gangs, you know what I mean, but young people, and there were really crazy stuff happening, yeah. They were smoking and dealing and all that stuff, got beaten up, you had to pay money, yeah, otherwise you got also problems. And nowadays the kids don't have this anymore. This is a good part, you know. So there's always a good and a bad part. The culture from back then doesn't exist anymore. Nowadays there are skateboarders which were really, I tell it to you, they would be not accepted in a skate park, alone from the clothing. When they would enter in such a style, they were quicker out there, you know. And also the part was roller skating and skateboarding didn't connect back then. I was one of only a small group who did both, because as a roller skater, to enter in a skateboard park, you know, that was dangerous. Believe me that. Not only that you heard words, you were not accepted in there. Yeah, when you had luck, they only shouted at you. I said, I don't want to say it in that language now, but go away, you know, in nice words. And when you had bad luck, they beat you up. Yeah, and with roller skates, you had no chance. So, and I also was one time in the park, which was my main park, in the Rapoldi Park. Yeah, and I was in there, the only guy with roller skates. And back then, as a little guy, when you were more grown up, you didn't have that problems, but there I entered people in who made really crazy stuff. And when you had bad luck and were standing on the wrong area, yeah, maybe you landed in hospital. You had, because of nothing. You were only standing in the wrong corner. I have seen that stuff, you know. If you have paid money, you had no problems, yeah. But you have to pay every dime and all that stuff. And one day I was in there with the roller skate. So you had maybe the bad luck when the wrong people entered in. And there were a lot of wrong people, believe me that. I have known really bad people back then. And when they said to me, be quiet, then you know what happened in there when the wrong people were in there. And on the other side, there were only skateboarders in. And I was with my inline skates in there, and they really said bad words to me. I should go while I'm in there. And I was sitting on the quarter pipe. And you have to imagine, I was in there with my skateboard normally. And the bigger ones didn't know me, but my friends in my age were not in there at that time. And one guy was jumping up with the skateboard and was pushing it from the quarter to my face, and so it punched into my face. And maybe it would happen better things, but one of the best skaters in there then said let him, because he knew I was in there more often with the skateboard. Yeah, and skateboarding then become bigger and bigger, especially in the late 90s. Yeah, so early 90s it was a growing up sport, a beside sport, and then it came the big time with skateboarding. And to the pushing part, that I wanted to tell you. I had one feet there, yeah, and the other feet here, and I was pushing this way. Not this way as normal, I pushed that way. Because we didn't know it, you know, when I talk in around 91, 92, and I had the classic big boards from the 80s, you know, those bright American style boards, not the classic boards. So we are back, and now not overheating, now the echoes were over. All echoes what I had. Now I had to load it up a little bit, and now we can go on. And then I started in around 1997 with the original skateboards, you know, with this, the classic ones to jump and so. And the thing was, to learn it, yeah, by your own is so difficult, you know, when you compare it to nowadays. This is a complete other thing now, yeah. I tell you that. I was not here in the city, I was living outside of the city, and there were a lot of skaters. It is a small village with, back then there were I think 1,500 people living there. Yeah, a little bit upwards, there are only the trees, the mountain, and only 1,500 people. But back then we were around 20 skaters, 20 skaters. And when I first started, I had a not professional board, I had a cheaper one, what you get as a fixed board, It was nice to learn, but of course you could not roll much. That was the main problem. The bearings were absolutely not good. And there I tried the first summer alone to jump. I always was on the street outside of the house where we lived. And there I trained and trained hours for hours. And I tell you that when you don't know one trick and no one can show you that, and there was no YouTube, no Facebook, no Instagram, nothing. There were no instructor videos, nothing. You could only watch the guys on the pictures from the magazine. I had all the magazines, the Trans World, later on the Avenue in Austria, Then the catalogs from Titus, Titus in English, Titus. There you ordered later on all the stuff. That was the crazy thing. And what was also there, not only the Trans World, Treasure magazine, and a few others. You could only watch the pictures, or when you got a VHS cassette, and I got a lot of VHS cassettes back then, how a ollie goes. When you have never done it, how should you imagine? And that was so difficult. Some guys there could make an ollie. They said, you have to bob and to make your feet there. But the first summer I learned it by my own. And I was training hours for hours. You know how much time that goes on? And now we go a little bit forward, because I needed, I can tell you that, after a few months I went to the sport place in the village, and there was one mini ramp, but a self-construction mini ramp. One nice guy from there, a human, an adult, who made a lot for the village, he built a mini ramp for the kids. That was a self-construction. Really, nowadays no one would write this. But back then that was crazy. And so I got there. And to go on now, no one from those group, I was the baddest one because I started it. All other were better. But the level back then, not one guy could do a kickflip. Can you imagine that? And they were driving 2 years, 1 year, no one could do it. And so when you had no one who can do it, and you can almost never to the city back then, how should you learn it? And I tell you that I needed 1 year to get a kickflip done. 1 year. That is crazy nowadays. But if you would know how much I have trained and tried, I did not know how to do it. I watched videos, maybe so, maybe this, maybe that, with your foot, You don't know it. 1 year until I landed my absolute first kickflip. And that was by the school area in the morning. I remember that I was trying, bam, I had it. And I tell you that later on, when I didn't drive anymore that much, I have seen kids there. That was in the 2008, 9, around that time, 2007. I've seen kids here in the near who tried ollie up on a walking way, from the street to the walking way that high. They a little bit they could achieve it, sometimes yes, sometimes no. And they could nothing do with a kickflip, they started it. And I tell you that because with my experience, I teach them. I say, do you want to know the kickflip? Let's try a little bit. I can teach it to you. And really, I could teach them the kickflip on the same day. On the same day they landed the kickflip. And that is the point. Can you imagine? I spent hours there, back then. 5-6 hours a day only to train. If someone tells you how to do it, what do you think how fast you can learn the tricks? Then you can do in 1 year a kickflip, a heel flip, a 360 flip, varial flip, laser flip. You can do all in 1 year if someone shows you that. And that is the thing nowadays. When you have a teacher, you can go to someone you can do it so much faster. They don't have to train that much, maybe they don't have the talent that much, but when someone shows you that, it goes so quicker. And the difference from back then, the skaters, to nowadays, I think, nowadays they can do in 3-4 weeks, they make a kickflip, not perfect, but they can land it a little bit in standing. They can do another trick and this and that. And back then we could do nothing with the flips. Yeah, when you lived in the village, in the city, there were better drivers, but you never met them when you were outside as a kid. Yeah, because there was no bus going there. Yeah, for example, on Sunday I was driving not one bus to the city. Then you know where I lived. And that was really, really crazy. So, but back then we could not make tricks like kickflips and that stuff, but we could drive that good. To drive, because we drive the whole day from A to B to C, from the supermarket to school. We had the whole day the skateboard by us. And nowadays they can make a kickflip in 2-3 weeks, but they cannot drive in a good way. You know, they are really shaking when they are driving, and we could drive all day long. We had such a good feeling on the board because we did this the whole day. That is, I think, a difference from back then to nowadays. And so, yeah, if I would have had a teacher or someone who showed me the level, the tricks, what do you think, how fast I would have grown up? And that is, on some things bad, on some things it is good, you know. The level back then was also another one than it is nowadays. But so, in the late 90s then, I had the big luck because it was growing so big, skateboarding. And also here, then we got some of the best skateboarders here into the city. And that was in 1999. We had the Alp Challenge, and there was one of the best street skaters from back then, Kareem Campbell. You know, that as a kid, with no internet, no YouTube, no Instagram, TikTok, nothing. You only knew them from the VHS cassettes and from the pictures from the magazines. And then you have seen the guys live in front of you. That was really crazy. And then there was also a big event, and it was a world event. The Air and Style skateboard event. The first one, I don't know if they made a second one. Yeah, I think there was a second one. But the first Air and Style skateboard event. And no other than Tony Hawk was skating here in Innsbruck. I have a video where he skated in the city, in the streets of Innsbruck. And then I have seen him, and that was outstanding. There you have seen a master at his work. And it was in the year where he was at his best, you know. There in this year he landed the famous 900. Maybe the most famous trick what went all over the world, in the news, everywhere, which had nothing to do with skateboarding, but they mentioned it. A skateboarder landed a 900. That was crazy. And in that year I have seen him. I think 2 months after he landed the 900. And amazing, you know. And so skateboarding, big part. And there I had much more VHS cassettes because you got much more. And one of the most famous was the Shorties. Fulfill the Dream with Chad Masker, you know. With the Ghetto Blaster, Chad Masker was so famous. It was an icon also outside of the skateboarding scene. Yeah, they knew who Tony Hawk is and they knew who Chad Masker was. It was crazy. And there was the young Brandon Durner in, and a lot of other VHS cassettes from New York, the Osiris, the legendary 411 tapes, and Monster, Münster, how was it called? Monster, Münster, the Münster contest, Monster Münster contest, I think it was called, in Germany. And there are a lot of other videos. So skateboarding was a big part, and yeah, it went good. But compared to nowadays, they can do the tricks in half a year. But yeah, I spent hours for this. It was really cool time. In winter, we drove in the garages. There was no skate hall. We had the Frachtenbahnhof. There also they come the security and all that stuff. We drove on cars in the garages and all that stuff, And nowadays it's complete other scene sometimes, yeah. And we had the big clothing, and yeah, that was crazy. So and now other two sports, the streetball and table tennis, for example. Because streetball we had, I don't have to mention anything else, but I can tell you, in basketball, I never was good and I'm still not good. Yeah, I think I had so many other sports where I'm better than basketball. Also, when you see it today, because streetball, basketball, I had no one who was really good. Where I lived, I played no one. I was the only one, and the others played sometimes a little bit with me, but there was no one. I had no and one tape at home, yeah, no VHS and one, no DVD and one. Where should you learn it? I was in no club, so I only shoot all the time and dribbled a little bit what I could do. And yeah, but I could do so many sports better than basketball. Also today, I think basketball is the number 8 sport from the level what I can do. I can say it. In skateboarding, I'm so much better than in basketball. Yeah, streetball. In roller skating, aggressive inline skating, I'm so much better than basketball, streetball. In tennis, I'm so much better. In table tennis, I'm miles better than in streetball. Inline hockey, I'm better. In fitness, I was much better than in streetball. Skateboarding, roller skate, ice hockey, I was better. So I think basketball is still only the number 8 sport from the level what I can do. Yeah, streetball, basketball. Only the 8 sport where I am. All other 7 sports I can do better. But it is what it is. And to table tennis, I went into a club also in the 90s. In the middle 90s, I went in there. And this is the only sport where I had talent. But maybe, because I learned tennis. And so when you go to table tennis, you have a feeling. But I can remember also in the early 90s, there I also had talent for table tennis. The only sport where I was talented. There I trained with some of the best, We had my trainer, there I got the mentality. The discipline, it was from the old school Eastern Europe school. Yeah, and that was, I could talk now a long time, but with those guys where I trained, they were the parents, the trainers from the children, and the children from my trainers. They were in the top 50 in the world. Yeah, top 50 in the world. And that, as European players, that was really crazy. And what level there was. And so, really, really hardcore training this was, believe me that. And there I could tell you other story, because in 1996, I had the opportunity to drove to a tournament outside of my federal state, in the other area in my country. And there I have seen back then it was the greatest table tennis player of all time in 1996, and it was Jan-Uwe Wallner. Yeah. Nowadays they changed a little bit, of course, but back then he was the greatest of all time. But it was amazing to see him. And then I had the opportunity to talk with him. It was crazy. I talked with him, he gave me an interview, wrote some things in, and then also he was sitting beside me. I went into to him. I went on to him and could talk, to the best player in the world when you were so little. That was outstanding, the greatest of all time. And you talk with him like it's the normalest thing on earth. That I also remember. I have this on VHS, And that was in 1996. Really, really cool. So now we can end the 90s series. We have done a lot. Long part now. But the 90s were a big decade, the early 90s and the late 90s. So I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, there exists so much more but this was the thing what I experienced, yeah. Maybe others have other films, and of course I had also other films, other music and other stuff, but this is too much. So I mentioned that what I have in my brain when I remember back. And yeah, it was a nice thing. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe there was something also for you. Maybe you remembered back the same things. Wow, now I've seen it again. I remember it back. So yeah, the 90s were great. And now we are here in 2024. Yeah, March 2024. So I hope you liked it. We will see us again, as always, by the Streetball. Until then, bye and ciao.